tell you about how the renowned Japanese composer and producer Ryuichi Sakamoto has died at the age of 71. He had fought a long battle with cancer. He was a pioneer of electronic music, but became internationally renowned as a film composer. He was the first Japanese musician to win an Oscar. The BBC's Tim Allman looks back at his life and career.
Haunting, melodic, timeless. Ryuichi Sakamoto's theme from Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, a fusion of East and West. It has become one of the most famous pieces of film music of all time. But it was for his work on Bernardo Bertolucci's The Last Emperor that Sakamoto really made his name, winning an Oscar, a Grammy and a BAFTA. On social media, tributes poured in. Professor Brian Cox, himself a former musician, tweeted, "He leaves a magnificent catalogue of music behind." Legendary British guitarist Johnny Marr described him as an elegant and timeless artist. And the trip-hop group Massive Attack called him a genius and a gentleman. Ryuichi Sakamoto was born in Tokyo in 1952. Inspired by Debussy and the Beatles, he began studying composition at the age of 10. He set up the Yellow Magic Orchestra in 1978, his pioneering sound earning him the mantle of the grandfather of electronic pop music. In later life, he also became an environmental campaigner. In a statement, Ryuichi Sakamoto's management company said he continued to create work whenever his health would allow. He lived with music until the very end.
Well, I'm joined now by film critic Lillian Crawford, who is in London. It's great to get you on the programme, Lillian. In the first instance, if you could just talk us through the contribution that Sakamoto made to both film and music, given what we have just seen from my colleague's report there, in terms of the influence far and wide, I suppose.
Absolutely. His film score for Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983, is probably the music he's best known for, and really it's quite an extraordinary example of a film where the music is almost so much more famous than the film itself and has had a greater legacy. That film also stars him in a role in that film alongside David Bowie and Takeshi Kitano. But ever since, he's created absolutely gorgeous scores for directors, including Bernardo Bertolucci, as we heard in the report, as well as Pedro Almodovar for the film High Heels, Brian De Palma, and more recently working with directors like Alejandro González Iñárritu. So really sort of producing great film music right until the end of his life. His final score for Hirokazu Koraida's next film later this year is going to be his final score.
Yeah, that lyrical music really stays with you, doesn't it? And something that he said in a 2018 interview that really stayed with me, I have to say. He described his striving to challenge to the conventions of Western musical composition and said that when I write scores, my thinking is limited in the forms of Western composition, which I learned when I was a teen. And I just wonder whether you can speak to that, you know, the fact that he was trying to find a happy marriage, if you will, a compromise between Western music that he'd learned, but also the fact that he was the first Japanese musician to win an Oscar, wasn't he?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point. He was very influenced by Western classical music, particularly Debussy, and I think that Debussy's sort of wave-like, water-like music is something that Sakamoto really used throughout his career. He absolutely loved Tarkovsky and Tarkovsky's Solaris and the sort of watery imagery, and he was often using these kinds of poetic images in his music. The international nature of his music is a really interesting point. As I listed those directors, you have directors from America, from Italy, from Spain, and films set across the world. He was really able to sort of adapt his style to those different cultures, and I think that's a really strong and unique aspect of his work as a film composer.
And just very briefly, if you can talk us through his battle with cancer.
He was first diagnosed in 2014 and then again later in his life. And there's a wonderful documentary called Ryuichi Sakamoto Coda, which is about his battle with cancer, reflecting on his music, but also coming to terms with the end of his life. And I highly recommend seeking that film out.